So today I have my friend Simon Chan, General Partner at First Hand Alliance. Welcome to the Data Exchange Podcast, Simon.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me here. Excited to be here.
So First Hand Alliance, based on your website, is a VC fund that invests in the future of B2B at the earliest stage, backed by a group of notable founders and operators. And we'll definitely get into what you're up to at First Hand Alliance. But first, for our audience, let's establish that you are technical. You have technical cred, street cred, PhD in computer science and ML at UCL, University College London, which for our listeners who may not be aware is the alma mater of at least two of the DeepMind's co-founders, right?
Yeah, that's an amazing research facility, definitely.
Yeah. And then, more importantly, I actually first met Simon when he was CEO and co-founder of PredictionIO. All right, so for those who may not remember, Simon, remind us of what PredictionIO was.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks. And great to meet everyone. Haven't done the podcast interview for really a long time. Good to be back here. So maybe I can give you a brief background about myself. So I'm Simon Chan, have been a founder for a really long time, starting from maybe 20 years ago, building my first company to the latest one, built a company called PredictionIO. The initial thinking process of why I created the company is while I was accidentally been doing a PhD research study at UCL, I realized that there are a lot of amazing machine learning research, neuroscience research going on in academia. But at the same time, when I look at my previous startup companies, we were building essentially natural language models, content recommendations models. But it's a talented team. We didn't see a lot of resources on the market, really. Like we're using some Python libraries, single machines and stuff like that, which made me wonder, like, why there's no such thing as easy as a database, as easy as like a MySQL, but for developers to build and deploy machine learning models on production, right? That's the beginning of PredictionIO, machine learning server for developers to build, train, deploy models. And I would say that's the first version of machine learning platform.
Yes. MLOps before MLOps was cool.
Exactly. Yeah, MLOps. I still remember we had a hard time explaining to VCs at that time, right? Everyone was excited about AI. And when I talk about this process, build, train, deploy models, investors like, oh, you're an AI company. And even when we talk to customers, potential customers, we often got redirected to the data science teams. The tricky part is to explain we're actually not quite an AI company, but an infrastructure company. Right? We serve the engineers and DevOps to deploy and monitor the model.
It was at least partially open source, right?
It was. We have a very popular open source model, partly because we're the very early versions of open source built on top of the Scala language. We're also a very early adopter of Spark. So yeah, the community loved the open source version of it, and we have been like ranking quite high on GitHub at the time.
So it's interesting because you were so ahead of the curve, because at that point, no one was really talking about solving problems around deployment, right?
I wouldn't say no one is talking about it, but it's not like a general thing. I think the industry was still exploring, hey, how, like, given all this like supervised learning models, what we can do with our business. There are a number of pioneers, like Salesforce being one, right? They were our customers. They used the products to manage the models, build the models, and end up to the company we joined, Salesforce, after the acquisition, and we're as far as I remember, we're the first acquisition of the Einstein AI initiative.
So at some point you decided to sell into Salesforce, right? So what are some of the key lessons you learned going from a startup to probably the pioneer of cloud computing, software as a service?
It's really an eye-opening experience for me personally. I have a long history background in building company from zero to something, right? But being able to see firsthand how a multi-billion-dollar company operate in this fast-moving world is fascinating. And I would say what surprised me most is seeing like a billion-dollar business unit being able to test the hypothesis, talk to customers, essentially applying the startup strategy, right? Try to get customer interest, even try to sell before you actually deploy too much resources to build, right? So that like you can keep being a pioneer in the network. I think that is something exciting and fascinating, and I'm sure unarguably Salesforce is really, really good at many things, but especially sales, marketing, getting on top in the customer's roadmap agenda. So there's a lot of things I learned at the company.
But one of the main things I assume, Simon, is you go from a startup with not many or not access to such a broad and wide variety of customers to a company that is just full of customers from all sorts of industries, all sorts of company sizes, all sorts of needs, right?
I think that's really the one of the key attractions for us to decide, hey, should we continue building the company or should we join the bigger, I would say, a mothership, right? Especially at that time, machine learning platform was still early. We see that the market is moving towards that direction. Like even after the acquisition, I became more active in investing personally and through some VC funds. In the past 10 years, I still keep seeing pitch deck about MLOps, like problem is still unsolved. A lot of entrepreneurs are still trying to solve it. But going back to your question, I think what attracts me most is the access to data at such a large organization. Salesforce itself is not the data set of just one company, but essentially it's a multi-tenant cloud product. Being able to work with a large variety of customers, build a platform, build a machine learning product that works across the board, that is super interesting. And also, actually before the time we joined, I didn't actually have a strong sense about it, but later on I realized there's a large developers communities, right? Through Heroku, through Fast.com, we're able to bring the product to a wider audience base, and that is attractive to me.
But also, because you had access to such a wide variety of companies, did your perception of ML adoption, maturity change? Because, out in Silicon Valley, we tend to think that, I mean, since all our friends work in these tech companies, that companies have all sorts of talented engineers and data scientists and if you just build them this one tool, then they would immediately appreciate it. But the reality might be different for companies in different parts of the world in different industries, right?
Yeah, I think the two new perspective, or I would say the renewed perspective is are first, number one, when a founder is building a product, like I've seen a lot of AI products targeting the software space, the enterprise space. Like, is it truly a business or is it a feature? Like, I think in the last 10 years, when the market was flooded with capital, some companies could get away with this question. Like, if you build a good feature, you get a good outcome through acquisition into a bigger product. Like you still have a good outcome, investor founders still have it. But I think like given the market shift, the conditions, now it is more important than ever to think about, are you building a business or are you building a feature, right? So, and another thing I've learned is maybe for founders, especially like us, coming out from a technical background, we always think, hey, accuracy. How do we improve the model's accuracy? That's important. That's a very challenging and interesting problem. In some business contexts, actually accessibility may be more important than accuracy. What I mean is how easy it is to integrate my product and actually use the intelligence into the business may be more important than getting like 2% or 3% more accurate in terms of the prediction accuracy in the scientific metrics. I think these are the three things I've learned again and again when working with customers.
So, so moving to today, so you have First-Hand Alliance, right? So, are you focused mostly on infrastructure and kind of software as a service infrastructure company? So, at a high level, before we dive into kind of specific themes, what kinds of companies are you focused on?
Yeah, so I can give you a background about First-Hand Alliance. Is actually my dream job. It's actually my dream type of VC fund, thinking about it from the founder's perspective. As a founder, when I was fundraising, right, of course I need the capital, but also it is important to have investors who are strategically valuable. And that's why you see a lot of founders, when they raise money, they want to have good angel investors into the cap table so that they can be helpful and with different expertise. So First-Hand Alliance, the concept is we're actually backed by a group of executive. Like I started with the resources of my Salesforce alumni network. First-Hand Alliance is backed by 22 Salesforce acquired founders, including myself. We also have our friends, other exited founders, executives in the B2B world. So we have a broad range of expertise just in this. And from the founder perspective, when you raise funding, we write the check, one single line on the cap table, but you get access to all these people. And because of the broad range of expertise, I would say the focus is really B2B, broadly speaking. My personal expertise is in AI developer platform, but we have other people in the community who are great at like future of work, security, digital transformation, and of course, like we're always looking at data, especially how data and AI can transform the industry.
So are you more interested in infrastructure platforms or applications?
Both. We do both, because if you look at the trend, right, of data or AI application business on the market, these applications and infrastructure always come hands to hand. Starting from the big data time, you have the BI. Big data essentially is enabled by SaaS, right? Like, hey, your application is running on the cloud. Now you can collect a lot of data. So big data came and you have the application, which is like, hey, look at my huge amount of data. That's BI. But in order to support BI, you really need huge storage, like the Hadoop and all these technologies to support it. And after the big data world, then we start to think, hey, now we have these amounts of data. We can store them, we can access them. What we can do? Maybe we can apply machine learning onto it. That's the first wave of like AI, smart intelligence applications, I would say. And similarly, you see the two applications and infrastructure opportunities happened at the same time. You have the applications like search, prioritization, automation, And then on the infrastructure side, like we talk about MLOps, right? How do you monitor the models? How do you access this data faster? So there are lots of opportunities in both sides of the world. And if you look forward, now we're probably in another wave of AI technology, the generative AI. And I can totally see that you have the obvious applications, you have the less obvious applications, but then we will need a new class of infrastructure to support that type of innovation.
So clearly, these foundation models are going to change a lot of applications, right? So first of all, you can already see search, the changes in search, right? So the expectation of the users doing searches will change, but that's just one manifestation. So Simon, I'll test this idea out on you, but my thesis, and it's not just me, a lot of several of my friends now, we think that actually it's a bit overblown to think that there's only going to be a few of these foundation models or foundation model providers, right? You can already see the rise of mid-sized models, Chinchilla from DeepMind, Llama from Meta, that, they're still massive models, but they're more manageable. But more importantly, enterprises may not be comfortable sending data through an API or being completely reliant on an API where they can't move fast. They can only move as fast as the API provider, which might be also supplying their competitor, right? So my sense, and along with several others, is that we're starting to see tools emerge that will allow companies to build much more custom versions of these foundation models. So I'm calling it decentralized custom models. So what's your sense? Are you starting to hear? You can imagine a healthcare company, a financial services company. Would they really want to ship all of that data to a foundation model that they don't control, right?
That's a great point. I think well, the two sides to think about it. One, I agree. The verticals, they have proprietary data, right? Hey, do I want to send it all to the general API, train the model, serve it to the customers, but at the same time, if you look at,
or I may not even be allowed to do that anyway, right?
Exactly,
By my regulators, right? So.
Right. At the same time, if you look at the history, right, cloud computing, I think is a good example. I think 20 years ago, before Salesforce, it's difficult to imagine I could run my HR data on the cloud, not on-prem. Right? So I would think there are shift. Maybe I think we will land somewhere in between. I believe companies will be more comfortable sending some kind of data to train the model, but at the same time, new services will come out, as you said, like the federated or segregated model training. Maybe the enterprise version of this AI will say, hey, we're separated multi-tenants. Like, we do not use your data to train the data sets for your competitors. I can totally see this kind of enterprise features will come up. Maybe that's even a business model for this machine learning model. I mean, these models. But the space is super interesting. Now the foundation model, I think, is even more interesting than the previous generation, like largely built on top of supervised learning. If you look at supervised learning, right, essentially we know it's mainly about scoring. You have a lot of content, you have a lot of objects, and you want to give it a score by providing the training data. So sorry, what it provides is really a lot of score, and then you can sort them. You can then rank a lot of data, you can rank the movies you like, you can rank the top 10 news feeds you want to read, you can rank the top 10 customers that you should call today, which are exciting, which are great, increase productivity. But at the same time, it is really the companies who hold a lot of data be able to benefit the most from these technology. But the foundation model is different, given now it enables applications to generate content, like by not just predicting 1 point, not just scoring 1 point, but scoring multiple words, which became an article, or multiple pixels, which became an image or video and audio. So maybe there will be a new class of, or several new classes of applications coming out from this innovation.
Which actually is another of my pet peeves, which is a lot of the people I know, and probably you know, are focused on platforms and infrastructure, but there's a lot of opportunities on the application side. I think partly because most of the people we know are engineers, and engineers want to build for other engineers. But in reality, there's so many tasks in companies that can benefit from this. Granted, it's on the application side, you kind of have to be passionate about what you're building to some extent, right? So you can't just fake that, I'm going to build something for in some area of healthcare or cybersecurity. But if I'm not interested in that, it's very hard as a founder to carry that through, I imagine, Simon.
Yeah, there are 4 categories. Yeah, there are 4 categories I'm actively looking at right now. One is horizontal applications, like maybe because of my exposure in the software space, so I see applications. So the one category is the horizontal application, which I would say is the obvious use cases, maybe too obvious. You send the data to OpenAI, and then they generate articles for you. So you can have the AI to write the blog post for you, write the email for you, generate the advertising content for you.
This is Jasper, basically.
Yeah, Jasper and the 10 and hundreds of pitch deck that like investors are seeing every day now.
But there's a way to still build a successful company if you're highly focused on the user experience and users, and making sure that your whatever it is that you build. By the way, I hear Jasper is now also trying to build their own model with Cerebrus, right? So whatever it is that you're building, you're constantly kind of getting feedback and improving the model, and therefore improving the user experience. The flywheel that people talk about, right?
Totally. Like if you have a way to focus and get proprietary data, like essentially you're doing the job much better than any other products, right? But don't forget that Jasper, I would say, is probably the first wave of foundation model, right? Like they have been around for a long time, and this company, that's why I say it's so obvious. There are a lot of people have already moved into this space, and
it might, Simon, it also might get incorporated into things like Notion or
exactly, yeah,
Google Docs, right?
Notion, Grammarly, Google Docs, like sometimes in this idea thinking process, right? Usually the first idea you can think of, yes, they're a good idea, but they might not be the best one in the competitive space. Now it's just so obvious. I'm pretty sure that the big companies like Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, everyone is moving into that direction, right? Hey, how do we basically just plug in the API and then we can provide a more intelligent service?
Except the one thing is if you're somewhat general purpose, like a Google Doc or a word processing document, you may not have the workflow or the collaboration or kind of the focus on the actual task that the user is trying to do, right? Am I trying to write text for a Google search campaign ad or a tweet or a blog post, like you said, or a press release? I mean, you can provide a really focused user experience, right?
Exactly. Which comes to the second point is there are general like obvious use cases, opportunities, but there's also vertical opportunities. I think this is what we're trying to suggest here, right? And what if you're summarizing the content or you're writing the content, but it's for construction, it's for interior design, it's for legal, it's for healthcare, it's for insurance, right? It's for your mortgage document. Like these are the area where you will need to fit in proprietary data, verticals domain, and you need to tune the model with your domain expertise. And I think this is an exciting area compared to the previous generation of AI, where when I say I built a ranking model for a specific industry, sometimes the market size is not big enough. Probably because the benefits, the profit margins, or the benefits margins you create by such AI is not high enough if you focused on just one vertical. But foundation model actually creates a lot of values just in a single task. It not only optimizes something, but it helps you draft the content. It helps you review the content. So I would say it can create opportunity.
This is what our engineer friends will say as a pushback, right? So, well, if I do that, that's great, but what if I make the wrong bet on the wrong vertical? That's why I'm building something more general purpose so I can benefit, right?
Yeah, that's really the trade-off, right? We have different types of entrepreneurs. Some really say, hey, I only build horizontal applications.
Or Simon, going back to my original point, that's why you have, even if you make the choice of a vertical, you have to be really interested in it.
Exactly.
If you're not interested in it, it's hard to fake it, right?
Exactly. And I think that's exactly right. Like when I invest in a company, especially it's vertical related, right? It's so important to look at the background of the founding team. Like, why are they building this product? What is the unfair domain expertise or insights that they have? And combining that with the breakthrough technology, I think we will see a lot of innovation, not just touching the general like search, prioritization recommendations, but we'll see hopefully the more traditional industry will get a lot more innovative and efficient in the coming future. So the vertical application is really a big space. But I do want to challenge myself and entrepreneurs, founders here is, hey, the foundation models, right? You can think about the obvious use cases, generate content for verticals. But does it open a new category of applications, right? Like the biggest innovation sometimes is really enabling some applications that we haven't thought of before. Marketplace, it created some great company like Airbnb, the real-time applications like created Ubers and companies like that. So now foundation model, essentially the powerful thing is the user interaction. In the last 30 years or so, when you interact with a software, it's either through your laptop, through your browser, through your mobile phones. Hey, this is how we enter the data. This is how we send a request, right? But now with the foundation model, you can talk to it and it talks back to you and it summarizes content to you. So what is the new category that will be created? I think it's up to founders' imaginations. And I think is also how brave we are to experiment new type of applications that no one had thought about before.
I think a key dimension here that we haven't, I think people don't talk about as much, and largely because the foundation models right now tend to be very modal specific, right? So text, vision, but
Mhm.
multimodality, I think, is going to be a key element here as these models become more sophisticated and able to. So that's one. So for example, you can imagine marrying one of these foundation models with location data. So
Mhm.
now when you land in, I don't know, name your favorite city in the world, now you have an actual travel companion, right? That's
Right. Yeah.
super sophisticated, right? So all over, I mean, to the exact location that I'm now in front of this particular address, what's in here, right? So talk to me about it. So there's definitely this element of multimodality. And then the second element that I alluded to earlier, Simon, is this notion of these decentralized custom models, because it turns out that if you look at some of these scaling laws, yes, the larger the model, the better. But what people are also realizing is that a lot of these models are uh, are not the most efficient, so they don't really exploit uh, the models as much as they can because they don't have enough data. So, for example, both chinchilla and llama are fewer parameters, but trained on much larger data, and you get more. So maybe there'll be some trends around the scaling laws, which will lead to quite decent models that aren't as big. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but some people have already ported Llama to like Raspberry Pi and
Yeah. To the
Google
edge,
Pixel, right?
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also the notion that maybe these models will shrink. And so what
I
does that what are the implications of that, right? So
I think that comes to the fourth category of opportunities, which is the infrastructure. Like I think we have the horizontal obvious use case. We have the vertical industry to disrupt. We probably have the new type of applications or new type of user experience to create. Well, in order to have all these freeze happen, we really need a new infrastructure, and that's I think is also a key place to think about if we're thinking about like innovation. Um, I would categorize that as fine tuning. Like now the general public model is available, but to your point, how do I use it? I have some proprietary data, right? How do I incorporate that? Um, and I'm sure that while the general model will be kind of become commodity, like given Google, probably Amazon, Microsoft's providing will providing the services, but um, people will try to put it on the edge. Like, how can I put it in my car? How can I put it in my phone? How can I put it in my camera? Um, so that we can have access to it everywhere. So opportunities will be there, but also I think it's important to remember foundation model. A large part of it is reinforcement learning, right? Like the human input and the human feedback is very important. So what is the best user interface for number one, the developers to talk to the models. Number two, for the end users to talk to the models. Like nowadays is very black box. Like, hey, yeah, it helps you write a blog post, but how do I provide feedback or training that is specifically for me, not the whole general model? I think that is
this
will
is
be something
where the model that lives on your iPhone or your Google Pixel might get more personalized. By the way, I wrote a post last week because I was grappling with these issues that you were talking about. I came up with this foundation model triad, right? So which is a tune, prompt, reward. So fine tune, prompt engineering, and then reinforcement learning with human feedback. By the way, all of these we're still in the early days, as you alluded to, Simon, because
Yep.
there's a lot of research being done as to whether or not these are even the right approaches to tune the models, but they happen to be what we're doing now. And which brings actually a larger point, which is basically there's this notion of building the models, but I think that as you alluded to, we need the tools to actually customize these models for our particular setting, but an equal number of tools to actually test and really validate and make sure these models are robust, aligned, whatever, responsible AI, basically build these models the same way we build software, with that rigor, right?
I completely agree with that's kind of the mental roadmap of where things will go. And also observability, right? Explainability.
Right.
These are the things we
Right.
have kind of taken for granted in the old like supervised learning. But that's also the biggest weakness of deep learning model, like which power the.
Oh, by the way,
model.
so observability, I mean, basically, like I said, so the things that we take for granted with other kinds of software.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So boring pieces of infrastructure in other parts of software need to exist for this too, right?
Right. But I do want to point out that timing is important. I think we're just at the beginning to explore the power of foundation models, right? Like you see the first wave of larger companies try to integrate the API into the product. It is very similar to the old day, the bigger guys like Netflix, Google try to use machine learning to rank products contents better. And then you start to see other applications got created. So we're still at that stage, I would say, in the foundation model side. We need infrastructure, but it's like thinking about from the company formation perspective, like is the market big enough to support a company in the next 12 months, right? Or are we thinking about 2 years, 3 years down the road? Now, if you look at the data responsibility side, the privacy, it really took several years, if not more, until the regulation reached a point. Hey, we're talking about GDPR. The society is more aware of like, hey, how are you using my data, right? And we may have some talking points about copyright, like false information and things like that in the foundation model right now. At what point the companies actually start investing money to solve the problem? I think that is to be determined.
No, I think I guess the point I was making is I think that on the tuning and customizing side, there's a lot of awareness of, because in many ways that's step one. For me to deploy, I have to tune it for my application, right? But I think on the testing side, testing and validation. I mean, obviously companies, depending on the company, some companies already are further along the journey of making sure the model is explainable, has been tested, and all these things, right? So, but the question is and this goes to you, Simon, since you worked at Salesforce, you encountered companies from all sorts of different kinds of sophistication. At this point, we need tools so that companies with average teams, with a data science team where none of the data scientists understand or are experts in deep learning, can take these developments and take advantage of them, right? Because we assume because we're in Silicon Valley, we assume that okay, you have data science team, yeah, you guys are probably know PyTorch and TensorFlow, or at least one of you do, but that's not the case. In most companies, still don't have people who are familiar with modern deep learning, right? So
I would say it's not just company outside of Silicon Valley, right? But in fact, a lot of the foundation model is getting so complicated, and you require data to train this. It's a new emerging trend, and I wouldn't expect many companies to build the technology in-house. The unique fact in this movement is, hey, actually there are companies who are already providing the APIs, who are already providing the models that you can use, right? So it's really also a business decision. Hey, do we need to build the model from the ground up, or are we making use of, as you said, some of the tools that help me customize the model? So I agree. Like, customizing the model, make it useful for me is will be, hey, what does it look like? I think that will be a very, very interesting opportunity, and also an urgent need there. But I also want to say one thing is, because of this black box nature of foundation model, perhaps we need to solve the problem in the product design level, meaning like, hey, perhaps we need to accept the fact that there somehow it's not explainable. Somehow there's error, like it might produce wrong results. So how do we design a product interaction so that customers expect things might not be accurate, like it's just a draft, rather than automatically send it out right now? At least I think it's also a product design challenge in the short term.
So I agree, and I think that so the scenario I have in mind is many companies at this point have data science teams, right? And data science teams typically are responsible for 3 buckets, right? So reports, models, experiments. So maybe this foundation models fall under, let's make sure the data science teams are comfortable with this kind of new models that we're bringing online. And so I think what we need is to provide, as you point out, right? So maybe the products themselves provide the data science teams some tools to make them comfortable as to the level of explainability and interpretability, right? So maybe the data science teams develop processes to make sure that these models are robust. I don't know what that would be, adversarial training. Maybe the data science teams has a process for doing that, right? And then finally, because these applications may interact with your users, you want to make sure that the data science teams have some level of, or not just the data science teams, but the domain experts have some level of oversight and control, right? So, I mean, in other words, at what point do you alert the operator, just like we do in DevOps, right? So, hey, there's an anomaly or something. You should go and intervene with this model and things like this. So a lot of these pieces that we take for granted in other parts of our software stack don't exist. Testing, kind of this observability, anomaly detection, all of this, right? So
totally, it is the gap between building a cool demo to actually, hey, we can use it massively on production.
mission
Like
critical yeah.
product automations, and like you said, like at what points do I get comfortable about this model, right? That I can click the button, deploy it. How do I explain it? how and when it's on production, like the term that I like to use is how do we debug it? Like
Yeah.
when there's a problem, how do I debug the
Or
model and also fix it?
like you alluded to earlier, since it's generative, how do I know that this sentence is suggesting to me is not a sentence that is also suggested to my competitor?
Right.
Right. You know, like for example, my task is to write a piece of email and I want this tool to suggest an email subject line. Well, it's the same subject line it suggested my competitor yesterday.
Right.
So, so maybe this is why some people will want more direct control over the model rather than, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone will do this, but there'll be enough companies who will want, who will not rely on an API.
Yeah, as I said, it's not just the science, right? But the user expectation, the user interaction will be a challenging part as we build these products and services. Okay, it's magical. It provides me with some content. Should I click the send button? Like, who is responsible for it? How do I know that the content is accurate? How do I know, as you said, hey, it's not used by the competitor? Do we need another tool on top of it to monitor it, or is it really just a user interaction? Say, hey, I put a big disclaimer here. This is what has been generated. You need to revert it by yourself.
Oh, by the way, Simon, so as we wind down, I want to make sure that I ask you this question. So, what about data engineering and data infrastructure? Are you also paying attention to any of the things happening there? Are you completely focused on AI?
Um, it's a field that I'm super interested in, like the data pipeline, storage of data. But I think it's still very early for the general company to think about, hey, what's the data engineering structure like for the new foundation model. But generally, I think data integrations, or actually, I would say maybe foundation model can help automate a lot of the tasks that was done in data engineering in ops. Like these are difficult works required a lot of expertise. At the same time, maybe the model can learn and maybe the model can provide suggestions. So instead of looking at what data engineering work is needed for the model, I'm actually looking at the other direction. Like, hey, are there something that foundation model can help in data integration, in data cleansing, right? Like, can I rely on the model to tell me what should be deleted or what should be modified?
So, we're recording this a few days after Silicon Valley Bank issue was resolved, and obviously there's a lot of layoffs in big tech companies. We have a higher inflation than we normally have had in the past. So tell our listeners, why is this a good time to start a company?
There is never no better time, right? I think as we survived every chaos, I believe in the last few days, most of us has become an experts in banking system, in macroeconomics and others. But as we all survived and as we all learned, that there's just no good time to start a company, especially you're just getting started. When you get started, you want to build a product not in a few months, but you want to build a healthy, fast-growing company in a few years, right? I don't think that we have a model to predict how the market will be like in a few years. So I would say that another thing I learned at Salesforce, going back to your very, very first questions in the podcast, is focused on the customers. If there's a target audience, if there's a ideal customer profile you really, really want to serve, you understand, and you're passionate about solving the problem. Now, this is the right time to build it.
So, this is probably my last question. So, for people who haven't been paying attention to the VC landscape, so what is the general environment for people wanting to raise money, let's say pre-seed, seed? Is it bad, or is it just as healthy as before, or what's the situation?
I think we need to give that questions into a context. Like there are many types of founders. There are many types of companies. Like if you're talking about crypto, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But generally, very, very broadly speaking, the market is less noisy now. You see founders coming out to start a company right now. They, generally speaking, they really see a problem that they try to solve. Not just, hey, this is cool to start a company, right? Hey, and that's important. There's money on the market. The deal flow or the investment pace has slowed down a little bit, but there's still activities. Like founders are still getting funded. Early stage, I would say like seed stage is less impacted. If you're raising like a couple of million or so, like if you have a solid team, good market, and you understand the customers, there's still a high chance that you get funded. Sometimes easily get funded is not a good thing. Like if I look at the past 20 years, knowing a lot of founders friends, if you have an idea, it's not challenged by a lot of people, it might just give you a false signal that, oh, I got the market, or I get customers easily, I got funding easily, keep going. And it might end up wasting you and your team several years of the time. Versus now, everyone is more cautious, careful, but it also means that you get more valuable feedback in your journey. So, if I have to start a company, I think this is the good year to start.
And would you say, Simon, that another possible route is just to follow a passion project, develop open source tools, and see where it leads?
That's one of the ideal scenarios. Right? For those of us, like we have technical background or we have friends who do, if we can afford the time, start the project, see how it goes, naturally you get the tractions and you can raise capital if you want, not just based on the concept, but actually based on the customer or user tractions. I think that's a proven path. That's a safe path to do.
And with that, thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me. This one.